And through the wonders of the time-space continuum, Charlie Rose.
You know what's interesting about that? It was Bob Gates in a meeting with Donald Trump who suggested he might look at Rex Tillerson because Trump was asking him about the people he was thinking about nominating, including Mitt Romney. And Trump said to Gates, anybody else I might think about? And he said, well, you might take a look at Rex Tillerson. He'd known Rex Tillerson for a long time, including their joint service together for the Boy Scouts of America.
Now, he had known him because of that, but also because he was on the ExxonMobil payroll along with Condi Rice.
Well, their consulting firm did have did do some occasional consulting.
So how did
we ask about that too?
Right, and so what did he say? Because a lot of people will say that would taint any endorsement from people who, albeit are very respected in former secretaries of state like Jim Baker and Condi Rice.
Well, I mean, I think he would say, as he did when I asked him about that very thing. You know, he said we didn't do that much with them. That we're people of integrity, and Rex Tillerson is as well, and we're not on their on their payroll per se. Consult with him. That is something that happens often in terms of people who leave government. They consult with corporations. I think that Robert Gates is a man of great integrity and would not be influenced by some consulting contract they might have had with ExxonMobil.
What did he have to say then?
I would assume that.
Well, what did he have to say about the idea that Rex Tillerson's confirmation hearing will serve as something of a proxy about this larger question of U.S.-Russia relations?
Well, it clearly comes. I mean, you heard what he said. I mean, the relation with Russia has been going badly and getting worse, and Putin has been more aggressive, and it's essential in terms of stopping what's going on in Syria, to have some kind of negotiated deal with the Russians, which would involve Bashar al-Assad, and they've been trying to do that.
Right, that horse has left the barn. I mean, we watch this humanitarian crisis by the day.
Right. It has left the barn except for the fact that the civil war continues. It's not over. It's over with respect to Aleppo. But the only way you're going to get anything done there is some kind of agreement with the Russians. Now, that suggests that they ought to be, and John Kerry has been flying back and forth forever trying to get it done. We had very little leverage on the ground at the time, in recent times when the negotiations were taking place. But what's happened is that this issue of Russian hacking has become, clearly an important conversation in America. And it also has to do with Donald Trump's relationship with Putin. He can speak to that. And with all that in the news, here comes the confirmation hearings for a new Secretary of State.
How does Secretary Gates believe that will go?
I don't think he knows. I mean, I think, obviously it doesn't take that many Democrats to stop. 2 or 3 Democrats could, or Republicans.
I mean, they could
join and reach.
And in the Foreign Relations Committee, it would just take 1 or 2 to turn.
That's right. But I mean, he's not a political head counter, Bob Gates. And at the same time, I mean, with respect to the financial ties he may have had in his firm in terms of an endorsement, Condoleezza Rice and Steve Hadley all have sort of said this man would make a good Secretary of State, and we endorse him. All of the relationships they have had, ought to be part of the record.
If we then are reworking fundamental ideas, ExxonMobil has been seen as something of a corporate sovereign,
right? I asked that question
with a foreign
Tillerson,
policy unto itself.
I did an interview with Tillerson in 2013. It was a big book that was written about Exxon, and I interviewed him not about the book. He didn't write the book. The book was critical in some ways of ExxonMobil, but I asked him about the fact that some people say Exxon has its own State Department because he really goes around the world having negotiations with heads of state. That's how powerful.
At times subverting State Department policy. It need be also said Rex Tillerson was opposed to Russian sanctions.
He was indeed, yes. But I mean, and ought to be questioned why on that. At the same time, he was speaking then as the head of ExxonMobil. If he's Secretary of State, as Bob Gates made clear to me, will be speaking as a representative of the United States government. You're working for 2 very different people there. On the one hand, ExxonMobil, now for the United States of America as Secretary of State.
Is it something that Secretary Gates then, obviously, he believes that sort of transition will be something of a seamless one then for a Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson?
I think so, but I think he believes that we have separation of powers for a very good reason. It is checks and balances. It is also confirmation process is a very valid process. Rex Tillerson ought to be aggressively questioned about what he believes, what his contacts have been, what he has done as the CEO of ExxonMobil, and what he would do as Secretary of State. In the end, it is going to be not his policy, it's going to be the policy of the President of the United States.
In a time so fraught, then, I'll get your hair on this one. Did Secretary Gates give you a sense of what it is perhaps he is optimistic about?
Well, no. I mean, I think he thinks that we have a huge challenge here. I mean, I think this is a guy who's been a student of Russia. He's been a student of Russia. And he said the relationship has deteriorated, and that it's at a very bad point. And the United States has to recognize that. I had on my program last night also Mike Morell, former, as you know, you've interviewed him, former acting director of the CIA and former deputy director of the CIA, who said it's imperative for the United States to respond to the hacking, which he believes that all the intelligence agencies believe came from Russia, and that the United States ought to respond. So I said, well, how should they respond? One way is sanctions, the kind of sanctions that we imposed on Iran. Now, we have sanctions against Russia, but these against Iran, well, obviously, were much tougher.
Then perhaps it begets the greater question. It's not so much how to stop the downward spiral of relations between the U.S. and Russia. Should there be any sort of relationship at this point, given what has happened between the United States and Russia?
I think it's essential that nations speak to each other.
Speaking to each other is one thing, but given what the intelligence community believes has happened here, is it possible to trust what is said?
Well, Ronald Reagan famously said, as you know, you're not that young. Trust but verify.
A lot of verification required.
Exactly.
Indeed.
But it is a huge story. I mean, Mike Morell said this is a political 9/11, this hacking, trying to disturb and influence our election process to do that. Now, lots of people step forward and say, Vladimir Putin thinks that we tried to do that. I mean, he thinks we tried to do that in Ukraine. He thinks that Hillary Clinton was involved in sort of believing that it was important for us, to support other people in the election. Now, clearly, I don't know that may be in his mind and may or may not be real in terms of how he defines it.
And yet we have a president-elect who is essentially denying a political 9/11.
So far, he's denying that he's saying that he's seen no proof that the Russians did this. Well, the intelligence community way back in October said, we all believe now that the Russians did it. Even the FBI, which may have some differences with the CIA about motive, was it in fact to do damage to Hillary Clinton, who they thought would be the winner at that time, as most people did in terms of the polls, or was it in fact to elect Donald Trump? So then again, the FBI has basically, as we understand, said that they have not gone so far as to suggest that in fact the motive was to elect Donald Trump.
Yeah, to meddle.
But create chaos, clearly to create chaos and questions and skepticism. You must be getting lots of people saying, get off.
No, they're actually saying, stretch, Charlie, stretch. No. It's very apparent then that the confirmation hearing to come for the man suggested by Secretary Gates is going to be a very important discussion to be had for many reasons.
But I mean, James Baker said to us yesterday on CTM, the most important thing for a Secretary of State to have is a very good relationship with the President. And he meant the President of the United States, because James Baker was a powerful Secretary of State, because he and the President of the United States, George Bush, 41, had known each other since their younger days in Houston. James Baker had been his campaign manager and all of that. So there was complete trust and support. And so when James Baker spoke for the United States, there was no question he was speaking for for George Bush. I'll come back if you invite.
Say nothing more. Charlie Rose, as always.
Thank you, sir. Pleasure to be here.
Every day.
All right, I'll be here.
3 times a day. And bring Cam Newton's pants.